What's up, everyone? Welcome to More Than Mortgage. I'm Chad Anderson. That guy is Zach Jones. We are at the quarter century mark on episodes. Welcome to number 25 of this that we started. We start January or was it December? I can't
I
remember.
think January. Yeah.
January. All right.
Turn of the year somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So anyway, welcome in. Thanks for hanging out with us. Today, it's the NAR settlement. So before we get into that, let's go ahead and remind you, like, subscribe, download, hit the bell, drop a comment, shoot a DM. This is a topic that we've hit on, I think, twice now, and this will be the third time, only because some actual new news has come out, and there's a website and a link and an article that we'll share with you. But this one's one that always has opinions. I actually taught a class in Alabama. I didn't teach a class per se, more just had an open discussion at a sales meeting, because when I go to sales meetings, I truly hate showing up with donuts and being like, here you go. I got the best rates, fastest service, best communication. I'm the guy, I'm the greatest. Like, that's so cliche and stupid to me. So we had an actual conversation about NAR, the impact, what's coming, what to anticipate, shared some war stories. So shout out, by the way, to Coldwell Banker in Huntsville with Estelle Phillips and her crew for allowing me to hang out and talk about that. But Zach, we've got some FAQs now. So we got some different, like, all right, what do we do in this situation? Who's this going to impact? What do we do? And yes, I think we all figured out where the agents get their list of 190 things they do during a transaction, because this FAQ list, it's a 94-page novel, it feels like, and I'll bring it up on the screen here in just a second. But Zach, it's getting closer and closer to this actually being implemented and put into reality.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, Chad, because I guess that legal things are always this way. They just seem to kind of go on and on and on. And my cynical nature attributes that to the billable hours model that the legal system operates under. As longer they can drag things out, the more money they make on them. But this is kind of one of those things. We were supposed to have word in June or July, all effective, and now it's August. And at least some things are coming to fruition. And the other side of this is that I think it's going to take a while to see how all of this ultimately fleshes out, because whenever you have these new rules that are open to interpretation, then everybody interprets them their own way. And then we find out that some interpretations are wrong. And so that it kind of there's a funnel of maybe best practices that comes into play. And ultimately we'll kind of settle on at least local and regional norms that are acceptable within the state structure of the way that real estate is transacted. But it's going to take a while to see that. And there's some companies that are included in this settlement, and there are still a number of very big players that are excluded from the settlement. So they've got to figure all of that out too before we come to any standards of practice. How about that?
Standards of practice. Well, you should be an attorney in your next life, Zach. You got it.
I don't think I could stand to be around myself if I was an attorney, but
right.
That's another one.
So here's the thing, and I kind of noticed this when I talked to the real estate group a couple of weeks ago, is that we went over a few things, and kind of like that previous article, Zach, where Fannie and Freddie and Jenny, they all kind of came out and said, hey, FYI, business as usual, and there's no changes. And then they use the keyword yet. Nothing changing yet. So basically, they heard the rumblings, and they heard people starting to throw all these hypotheticals out there, and they squashed it and said, that's really not the intent. The intent was to work on this, quote, price fixing scenario. But like you and I talked about on this thing, is it really going, like, I just don't see where it's going to change a whole lot. Like, it's a big deal. It's newsworthy. It's a major overhaul. It's scaring a lot of people. But we saw this practice kind of take place already, did we not? Like during COVID, for example, realtors swore to the heavens, whichever God you pray to, they swore to that super power that they were never taking their customer again to a new construction subdivision, because those builders were cutting them out. They were only paying 1%. They were paying no percent. They were paying 0.5%. They were not offering
$99.
closing costs. Yeah, whatever. Some builders wouldn't even give you a gas card for bringing them by. That's what they were doing, right? They were complaining and screaming
Yep,
and yelling from the heavens. But why were they doing that? Why were the builders doing that? It's a seller's market.
because they
It was,
could.
it was a seller's market like we had never seen before. It transitioned back to a buyer's market. Guess what the builders did? Come on in, guys. 4.9%, $20,000 in closing costs, $10,000 agent bonus. Come on into our community and check out what we have today. People driving right on in
Yep.
because it was a buyer's market.
All it took was
So,
an email and a little bit of promotion, a phone call.
so I'm not faulting realtors for being upset because they're getting cut out, but I'm also not faulting them for going back on what their soapbox was and then driving into the community because we're in a commission driven industry. So to me, the same practices are going to take place, my opinion. Maybe it's not advertised, maybe it's not published. But when a seller needs to sell a home, they're going to do whatever they can to get
Right.
the buyer agent to bring them through. When a
Depending
seller
on the market conditions.
Correct. When
Yeah.
a seller doesn't need to beg you to bring them to your house, then there are 10 people standing outside. Guess what? You might get cut out. You might take
Yep.
less.
Yep.
So to me, like, that's the only thing that frustrates me with all of this. It's newsworthy. You and I have now spent 3 episodes on this topic. This is the third. Articles are coming out, lawyers, opinions, Facebook memes, all these things are coming out. But at the end of the day, is it not just the same? Like, I don't see it. Like, to me, it's just the same. The market, the free market is going to work itself out, in my opinion.
Well, I think what you have to take into consideration, Chad, is that you and I work in a business that's very market driven.
Mhm.
And we see it on a daily basis. We just got off a call with the company that talked about how we utilize different investors on different weeks and sometimes different days because of the way that they price things. And so it's not, if you think about it, it's not unlike what the builders are doing. Our investors are like builders, and sometimes they offer better incentives and they offer better. We don't ever make more as a company personally. I don't ever make more as a loan officer by taking it to one company or another, but I get better pricing for my customer. And so
Right.
I don't get upset when company A is too busy to do business with me, so they throttle their rates up in order to control their volume. I just go to company B and C and
Mm.
deal with the adjustments that I need to make because they're a little bit more cumbersome to work with, or I don't like the way that they order appraisals, or I got to reorient to the way that they disclose a loan. It's just making adjustments based on the market, and since we're doing that all the time, we don't put our stake in the sand and say, hey, we're going to die on this mountain of we're not going to take loans to XYZ company anymore. But realtors have a longer cycle in these, in whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. And so I think it's easier for them to get kind of entrenched and saying, hey, we're not going to do business with builders, or I'll never take another client and darken the doors of XYZ builder ever again. And then they're down there next week because XYZ builder is now doing a different incentive program.
Yeah.
So all of this is very interesting. It'll be the changes. I do think that there's going to be a material change in the way that buyers agents conduct their business. It's going to be much more professional in the way that they do their work, and they're going to have to get used to having an uncomfortable conversation that will
That's
ultimately
it.
get comfortable
That's
about their compensation,
Yeah.
about their exclusivity, and about their value as a professional to be engaged. And so it's going to go a whole lot like, here's what I provide for you. Um, do you find that a value? This is what I charge for it, and here's my contract.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot easier for those buyers agents to say, "Oh, you want to see a house? Let's go." And they get to do the carrot work before they ever come to the stick. And so you get the exciting house with a beautiful backyard and the cherry tree in bloom on the front lawn. And it's all about, okay, so now we got some paperwork to get through. What do you want to offer? And let's get you pre-qualified. Da, da, da. And so that process is going to have to be reversed to at least include paperwork before ever seeing a house. There's a different conversation that's going to happen.
It's one key word, and I love this word because it really eliminates all problems, anxiety, frustration, confrontation. It eliminates all of it. Expectations.
Yep.
The word expectation solves 95+% of problems.
It
'Cause
causes problems and it
does.
solves problems, right?
Well, yeah, and it only
Yeah.
causes problems because it doesn't exist in that specific situation.
Not clear.
When it
Yeah.
yeah, when it causes problems is because expectation isn't clear or doesn't
Right.
exist. And
Right.
that's when things get muddied, and then you go into assumptions, and then you go into personalities, and that's when things spiral out of control.
Right.
So, expectation is such a key word in life, not just in business, real estate, mortgage, whatever. Expectation is just such a key word in life because if you don't establish them, then you each have your own. And if those two don't mesh, then you've got a serious problem. And that I think is where buyer agents, the ones who can do that, you said it well, professionally, and they can articulate it, and they can do it without it being uncomfortable and awkward, and they can demonstrate the value and set that expectation, and even go through 2, 3, 4, 5 real life scenarios, then as examples, then the buyer should not have any questions when those things come up, or a
Right.
seller should not have any questions when those things come up. We do that. We talk to people all the time, and I say, look, this is option one and path one, and this is why we're going this route because it's the best deal for you. But hey, I'm going to go ahead and tell you items A and B here in your situation could be road bumps. And so that may have to pivot us to a second path, which isn't as desirable. But we can still get you the house. But you're just setting the expectation.
Right.
Or when somebody asks you for a 7-day close, hey, probably not the best idea to say, like, yes, guaranteed. It's more of a,
Right.
well, let's see how fast we can go. And then, we'll talk about it, but I don't want to promise anything. And let's just plan for, a different day as as a backup or something. Um, Setting expectations. That's all it is. And going back one more time, so people get a peek behind our curtain. What Zach said is so true in the mortgage world. You essentially get paid the exact same per loan. Now, there are some small variances to it, and depending on how you're set up and how your license is done and so forth. But essentially, it's hey, you get the same commission, and you're picking an investor. Now, the investor, as Zach said, could have different rates. Well, obviously, everybody goes, well, why in the world wouldn't you just always take it to the lowest rate? Because rate's not everything. And that's because this article came out against UWM, United Wholesale Mortgage, recently about how they try to force and ambush people into sending all their loans there. And what I give UWM credit for is they have created such a process and such a simplicity to everything that people want to send loans there. They want to do it because they know it's the easiest. Think about that. If everything was always based on the cheapest, then your experience and knowledge is worthless. So
Right.
I have no problem with letting the free market decide these things because, hey, if they're that good and willing to do things that much better, then it is what it is. So, a little soapbox moment there, but people need to understand expectations and also, hey, free market because it plays such a big role into a lot of this, and they cross over and they intersect and bleed together quite often, especially in our industry. So
Right.
let's take a look at some of these FAQs. We'll put the article in the comments or in the link to the video, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or whatnot. We'll put the article link somewhere, but it's on the NAR website, NAR Settlement FAQs. Did any of these, Zach, like stand out to you? I mean, they kind of categorize them of settlement overview, key terms, and then they go into who's covered. They talk about practice changes, effective dates, offers, compensation, on and on, written agreements. I mean, it goes all the way through and down. There are 94 FAQs here. So you got some light reading material.
Yeah.
But
There's a
anything
lot of
stand out?
repetition and a lot of big picture kind of perspectives on the largest issues around price fixing and advertising of a buyer's agent commissions being offered by the seller. I think again that the um, the legally acceptable local practices and national practices, kind of depending on what the state regulations are, will ultimately kind of tell the tale about how communication standards are established. The fact of the matter is that if a seller is offering a commission for a buyer's agent, in spite of the fact that that can't be listed in the MLS as a compensation point, it still has to be communicated some way, somehow, to buyers and their agents, because it's a profoundly important part of that transaction. And just a simple example would be if you had a first time home buyer who was really strapped on cash and just didn't have any money, and they had signed a buyer's agreement with the buyer's agent that there was going to be a 3% commission being paid to them. Then that young family that is just trying to scrape together enough to get to the closing table is going to have to be buying a house where there is an offer of compensation in some shape, form, or fashion from the seller. And just because it's not formalized in the MLS, there still has to be some communication back and forth. So again, we're coming in. I think that one of the adjustments that's going to happen in the real estate industry is that people are going to have to talk to each other again. And we've gotten so far away from good communication skills in our world, in our technologically advanced civilization, that we're going to have conversations again and be able to ask questions appropriately and also get responses in a timely fashion.
You know
So
what's
it
funny about
sounds
that?
it
Here's
sounds simple, but Ben, that's going to call out half of the industry on all sides, and then you have to
yeah,
also be able to effectively communicate those terms to your finance person. We in the mortgage side of things, we have to know these things, and we have to be able to talk about them openly so that we can understand the way a situation is structured.
here's what's funny about all of that, and you bring up the communication. And look, I know there are agents who communicate super well, and then some that don't. And there are loan officers and mortgage people who do the same. They're amazing. Even be accused of over communicating, and then some that you can't get them no matter what.
Right.
And that just happens. That's more personality traits than it is anything. But it is funny because you bring that up, and there are times where I've literally called and said, hey, I need to chat with you 2 minutes, just give you a quick update on something. And then you don't hear at all from the agent. And then a day later, they say, oh, I'm busy. Can you just text it to me? Like, well, not everything is just a text or
Right.
email. And what was ironic is we get to the end of that process and you reach out, reach out, reach out. And then 2 days before closing, there was an issue with the HOA on a condo. And all of a sudden, I can't believe you didn't communicate anything with me. So there's that story. But
Yeah.
then there's another one where we communicate over and over, never hear from the agent, literally, no reply, nothing. 2 days after closing, gives us an unbelievable review on Google and refers the next client.
Right.
Both times, like, didn't ever communicate, really.
Mhm.
But one agent is like furious with you at the end. We fixed it and it closed and it was fine and on time. But they're just that way. Then the other one couldn't be happier. But you would never know it. And there are those times where, hey, communication, like sometimes literally just to say, hey, everything's good. Do you got any questions? Like, even if it's a little something, because what we find, I see this a lot. The little things may be little to you, but they're actually a major ordeal.
Right.
Like whether it's the loan process or the timeline of events, you just can't assume anything, whether you're a
Right.
first time home buyer, whether you're a 10th time home buyer, because things change in our industries constantly. So you just can't assume. But I'm with you. We actually made that joke in the sales meeting. Oh my God, you're going to have to talk to each other again.
Yeah.
And it is a real thing. It's going to have to happen.
So
So,
that it's the same thing. Okay, so we've talked about two different things here, Chad. The biggest changes are you're going to have to communicate. Number
yeah.
one,
And
you're going to have to learn to
expectation.
communicate with your buyers
Yep.
and, talk about a contract and get something signed. Because here's one of the provisions of this deal. And it's interesting how, how this, I'm intrigued by how this made it into the settlement lawsuit, the settlement to the lawsuit. These buyers agents are going to have an agreement signed with the buyers before they even tour a property.
Yes.
I'm not sure how all that happened, but that is one of these provisions that they found so important that it's one of the big, maybe 2 or 3 or 5 bullet points is you better have an agreement of some sort signed. Now, we've already got a little bit of a variation on that with Zillow coming out with what they called their promoting last week before this all became, announced on. This was announced on Sunday. Do you realize that? NAR posted this on Sunday, which is an
That's weird.
interesting time to do it.
Yeah.
But this came
Sunday
out last
news
week.
dump, right?
Zillow's promoting a touring agreement, not a buyer's agency agreement, but it's a watered down agency agreement light where you're just signing a time limited touring agreement where you're agreeing to engage an agent and the agent has permission to show you properties and you've got something that's an official document that says, hey, we can go in these houses on Saturday, and then the agreement expires and we have no obligations. It's an interesting variation and maybe a really good idea if it stands the legal test because it gives agents who are and buyers who are not really ready to tackle the agency agreement contract yet maybe a way to kick tires with each other. Do a little test drive on Saturday. Let's go see 4 houses and you like me, I like you. Let's then maybe we sign an agreement. It's an interesting twist. We'll see if it holds water legally, but that's one of those things that I'm talking about that I think will filter out eventually.
Yeah. That'll be interesting just to see, because you and I talked about that Zillow and these other companies, you really start going down some videos and some looking behind the curtain. BlackRocks and Vanguards and all these other companies, Open Door, OfferPad, they want what the realtors have.
Right.
And that is the local trust and presence. But they can't crack that. They can't penetrate that. And that's been a problem for them. And that's why a lot of them have failed, is because communities still want to work within the community, not necessarily from or with someone that's across the country sitting
Right.
behind a computer just doing a template. And that is something that currently you have the edge over. But they are going to continue to push the envelope because they want the US housing economy is 30% of the total economy.
Mm.
30%.
It's big
So,
money.
so the big companies are not okay with the little guy sharing that 30%. They want their cut of that 30%. It's the biggest sector in the United States.
So
So
let
they're
me
going
ask
to
you,
continue to push that.
let me interrupt you and ask you why you said currently, because I'm going down a path as well in my mind that says currently these big tech companies have not been able to penetrate what you called the local expertise. I call it relationship,
Yeah,
connection, whatever it is.
same
They have
thing. Yeah.
not been able to overcome the need for the American real estate consumer to have somebody that they can talk to, text, meet at a house, come over and do a listing appointment, drive around together, talk to, what do you think about this? Can you give me the down low on the schools? They've not been able to penetrate the value of the relationship with a local expert who is entrenched and educated on the community yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at cars and the different car models. Carvana didn't make it. I still see their spiral with all their cars in there. Didn't make it. CarMax has kind of made it, where it's fixed price, walk in, no negotiating. Here you go. Those are similar models in a way. Even though CarMax still has the car locally, you could go on their website and the car will be transported to you in your city for a fee, right? So, but when you're talking about the housing industry, largest asset you'll ever purchase in your entire life, unless you're going to go buy a plane. That's about the only thing I can think of as an airplane. That would be an asset that you're going to purchase. It's larger, plus the airplane's depreciating asset. So when you're talking about housing, though, those companies aren't going to give up. There's too much money at stake.
Right.
They're not going to go away peacefully. It's not like you keep winning the war and they eventually give up and go home. They will keep coming.
They're chipping away at it. They're gaining market share, so they're winning.
They are. And here's my fear for it, and where eventually it kind of goes is down the road, generations are going to die off that are not welcoming to the technology. They're going to go away.
Right.
And the more that generations evolve into tech and computers and iPads and watches and phones, and it's normal. Think about this. 10 years ago, it wasn't very normal for you to go rent somebody else's house, Airbnb, as your place to live in for a week. That was not normal. Whenever it was, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, that was not normal. That was new. It was not normal for someone to pull up in their vehicle, and just because they have a sticker with the letter U on the windshield, that you get in their car and they drive you somewhere for a fee.
Right.
That was not normal. Those things are now completely normal. You are looked at strangely if you don't do those things. You are looked at like you're a dinosaur if your credit card is not on the internet. Yet 25 years ago, you were insane to put your credit card or your social security number on the internet. Those things evolve. So the battle is still tech. Maybe the current generation doesn't have to worry about it near as much. But as time and tech progress and then generations fall off, the generations eventually, in my opinion, will care less and less about the local relationship, because their whole life is going to be based on somebody somewhere else doing something for them.
We're
So
totally being we're being conditioned to that in every area of our lives.
Yeah.
The diva, I think it's a devolution. Maybe it's an evolution. Depends on what side you're on. But
you don't even order grocery, or you don't even go to the grocery store anymore,
no,
Zach.
you don't engage who wants to engage a cashier when you do?
You now do. There are more self-checkout lines than there are regular lines.
I'd rather do it. I don't want to have chit chat. I don't want to have to deal with that guy bagging the groceries. I don't want to do that. So all of that, we're being conditioned to that. And so there is a long game with all of these companies. Well, let's pop back to the NAR settlement, because I think that there's a couple of points in here that are very important, and you'll see them kind of mentioned over and over again. And it's this, one of which is this umbrella of immunity from further settlement and further lawsuits offered by NAR to its members. And that's one of the benefits that I saw very early on, being an amateur, legal observer on the outside who's interested in this because it's a part of my industry, but I'm not directly affected by it because I'm not a real estate agent. But I knew very early on, from understanding about the way class action suits worked, that if you were a member of NAR and you got caught in this umbrella of immunity, that protection was significant, because as soon as this lawsuit was settled in favor of the plaintiffs, then it makes everybody in the industry vulnerable. So there is a lot of language in the facts about the protections that this settlement offers to its members, and then there are also some very notable language about exclusions of the outfits, the organizations, the companies, the parent companies that are excluded from the settlement currently, that are going to have to then go to bat within a mediation period and try to get themselves included or offer compensation to the plaintiffs separately from any settlement that NAR has negotiated, and create settlement terms so that their membership will be excluded. And I think that the most notable, I think it kind of settles down to this. Don't take me for 100% because I'm not a legal expert, but the exclusions specifically to this settlement that's being agreed upon, which actually technically won't be agreed upon until after. I don't know if you knew this or not, but this settlement hasn't been agreed to for the
No,
August
no, not at
17th
all.
engagement. It's
Yeah,
not going to be agreed to. It's not scheduled for
it's proposed.
ratification
Yeah,
until November or something. I don't know.
yeah,
It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be after it goes into effect. But
yeah.
EXP Realty, EXP World Holdings, Hanna Holdings, HomeSmart International, Howard Hanna Real Estate, Redfin, United Real Estate, and Weichert Realtors are all excluded from these current terms. And then Home Services of America and all of its affiliates are handled under another different settlement that was announced on April 26th. Now, Home Services America, that's going to be your Berkshire Hathaway family of companies. And there's a big ton of them that are in the real estate side now. So these other ones that I mentioned that are excluded have to work out their own settlement agreements within the mediation period. It'll be interesting to see kind of if those are, I don't know, it's so silly, this legal mumbo jumbo, whether they have different settlement terms. That would be such, think about what a cluster that would be, Chad, if you've got a Redfin agent or a United Realty agent that has a different set of terms that they have to operate under than all of the NAR members. And then, you know, those agents have to keep that in mind, that I can't really do things the way that everybody else in my MLS area is doing them, because I'm bound to a different set of rules. And it would be messy if they didn't agree to all the same terms, it seems like to me.
Yes, messy would be putting it lightly. Imagine same thing with mortgages. If we had different rules than
Yeah.
another company down the street. I mean,
Ridiculous,
how do you
right?
do that? How do you get
Yeah.
in? Yeah, like there are literally laws titled fair lending. So imagine two companies abiding by different rules, um, trying to both fall under fair lending. It makes no sense. Same thing
Yeah.
with real estate. I don't understand how that would be doable or possible. So
Right.
well, we can't promise you there won't be a fourth episode about this topic
Yeah.
because it more and more continues to evolve, and obviously it's kind of the focal point and front and center here in 2024 as to what's going to unravel. And
Yeah.
what's crazy too is the housing market still incredibly strong. So much pent up demand. We are seeing people actually trade in their 3% mortgage rates to buy a home at a 7% mortgage rate. And I have thoughts on that. We can do that another show. But there are lots of people who are tired of waiting, and they just said, I'm just going to go ahead and do the move up now and suck up the higher payment and hope to refinance later to
Doesn't
get.
that kind of seem like the flavor is that people just finally got fatigued about waiting for something else to happen? It just,
Yeah.
like in the last 4 to 6 weeks, seems like there's kind of a little surge that's coming, and
I
I'm not
credit it.
sure what.
I credit it to money burning a hole in your pocket. Meaning
Maybe.
that you got $100 in your pocket, you know, the old adage, you can't wait to spend it, right? It's
Yeah.
burning a hole in your pocket. I think the same thing metaphorically is happening with home equity across the country. I think people are finally seeing that they have 100, 200, 300, $500,000 in equity in their properties, and they're kind of stepping back and going, wow, I could move out, be debt free, the whole thing, and move on. And I just think that's kind of where it's gotten, is that a year ago they
Yeah.
didn't want to do it. But now they're tired of waiting, and they said, we're doing it. It's happening,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
deal with it later. So that's part of the debt problem in this country too. Like, the debt is causing people to react this way because
Right.
credit
That's
card
true.
debt's at an all-time high. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a big cycle, right? Just giant circle, giant loop. So, all right, that'll do it for us. Thanks for hanging out with us. He's Zach Jones. I'm Chad Anderson. Last time, download, like, subscribe, hit the bell, share with somebody, follow us on the different platforms right here. And check us out, engage, comment, shoot us a DM. Would love your feedback on some of this, and have enjoyed the collaboration with all of you who have reached out
Yeah.
during this 25 episodes now. So for Zach, I'm Chad. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next week.